Good morning, Zoom people. Oh, now I'm connected to audio. Good morning, Zoom people. Alrighty, well, we're gonna go ahead and get started. We've got some folks on Zoom today. Welcome, Zoom folks. And so I'm gonna go ahead and take attendance, trying to keep in mind the folks who are on Zoom. And then the first thing we're gonna do today is another group assignment. So Zoom folks, you all will end up being one group together. I'll put you in a breakout room. Everybody else will sort of divide up in here. So Mia, Deja, Laura, Abby, Monica, Sarah, Miriam, Lauren, Micaiah, Lyric, Onyx, not here, India, Jalen is over on Zoom, Daria, and Ray is on Zoom, Kevin, Sydney, what's that? Okay, cool. Alex, I saw. Yeah, there's two guys, so I'm gonna learn their names faster. Apologies in advance to all the women. That's not very feminist of me. Sarah. Melissa is also on Zoom. Linda. Antoinette. Jenna. Sequoia. Awesome. And Grayson. Okay. So the first thing y'all are gonna do today is another group assignment, and I'm gonna go ahead and actually open the link so y'all will be able to see it. So this, I'm going to put you into 8 groups. Our Zoom folks will be group 8. And then I'm going to do the old lame professor thing just so you start to get to know other people in the class and have y'all count off 1 to 7. I know it's lame, bear with me. I'm trying to shake it up a little. But here's the tiny URL. I realized the other day, let me make that bigger. I realized the other day that doing the QR code was too hard from the back of the classroom. So if you just type that in either your laptop or your phone, it should take you there. It's career SH for scavenger hunt. And what you're gonna do is each group is assigned a career. There is a link to the APA website where you can go and find more information about that area of psychology. There are some questions for you to answer. I'm anticipating this might take about 20 minutes or so. So our reporting back might lead into Friday. That's okay. This course is made to be a little bit flexible. So go ahead and go to this link. And then I'm just gonna have you count off going down rows. Actually, real quick, let me double check that my memory is correct. And there are actually 8 groups. So I'm not assigning y'all to one that doesn't exist. Yes, okay, cool. It's morning, y'all. Okay, so go ahead. You're free. Oh, good. 5. And then you'll be 1. You're free. Yeah. Oh, good. 1, 2, and then 3, 4, 5, 6, and you are a 7. So find everybody who has your number. And that is the group that you will be assigned to. And I'll put that link back up for y'all. But what you're gonna do is go into the group. Yes, Jalen, I can put the link here to the assignment. And then I'm gonna put you all Zoom folks into a breakout room, and you are group 8. Awesome. All right, so that should move you to the room Zoom, folks. And I will put that link back up for y'all. So that everyone can see it. All righty, well, maybe not that much. There we go. All righty, so this is, again, trying to shake things up a bit. I used to cover this very dryly, like you'll see after we go through this assignment. I have a slide that just like lists a bunch of areas. This is much more interesting, I think, and lets you all see more about these various ways that you can use psychological knowledge. All right, so group one, tell us about brain science and cognitive psychology. What does the understanding section say about this subfield?
The brain allows us to learn, see, remember, to perceive, understand, and create languages. And it also says that the brain sees sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, we think of the brain as like infallible. Woo, our memory's perfect. Humans mess stuff up all the time, right? Our brain can really mess us up. All right. What was an example of research and action?
In the clinical setting, cognitive psychologists are treating issues related to mental processes like Alzheimer's disease and the downfalls that can affect like speech and sensory issues.
Exactly. Yeah. So real applications for diseases, disorders that some of you, may have had experience with elder loved ones in your life experiencing. All right. What does the meet a psychologist person do for their job?
We have Dr. Jennifer Manley, who researches how differences in cultural and developmental experiences can affect the rates of age, like in regards to Alzheimer's disease.
Exactly. Alrighty, and what can you do with this type of degree?
A lot of psychologists working in this will usually go into like the university field where they're teaching that research. But recently there's like a bigger boom in the private sectors, like like software development and organizational.
Yeah, you can't tell me that the metaverse isn't hiring a whole bunch of these folks, right? To figure that stuff out. All right, how do you make it happen? How do you get a degree or a position here?
For an entry level position, you just need a bachelor's degree, but for a lot of like larger careers, you need a master's or doctoral degree. And for people with a master's degree, they can do performance research, but they're like larger by doctoral.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's any of the applied fields, that's going to be true where unless you have worked through all the steps to get your PhD and get licensure, you can work, you just need to be supervised by someone who has all that stuff, basically. All right, and what can you earn?
The American Psychological Association said that those employed at universities earned about $76,000 in 2009, and those working in like industrial or organizational got about like 87,000.
Yeah, so in general, if you're going into industrial organizational, which is working more than the industry or business sector, that's where you're going to make a lot of money as a psychologist. So if you're someone who's like, it's psychology is for me, but I really want to get that money, you look into IO because it does a lot of the same things clinical psych does, but with much better salaries. So awesome. Thank you, group one. All right, group two, climate and environmental psychology. What does the understanding section say? I don't even know where group two is. Yeah, so these folks are thinking about how we affect the environment, but also about how the environment affects us. This is a really growing area within psychology right now because of the effects of climate change, right? Which unfortunately we're seeing right now, right? So if you look at the fact that a third of Pakistan is underwater, but not too far away in China, there are record droughts, right? We know that these are the effects of climate change. And so not only will they be working on, how these things interact, but also how to get people to change their behavior. That's really hard, right? All right, what is an example of research and action for your group subfield? Exactly. So like what actually works, right? And sometimes it's stupid little things. Like, I don't know if y'all remember Smokey the Bear, right? Only you can prevent forest fires. That is like burned in my brain. It was on TV. I was born in the 80s, really dating myself here. And that was on TV all the time, like at least once every show when I was watching Saturday morning cartoons, right? So yeah, what are those simple, effective ways to get these messages across and stick in people's minds? Alrighty, so who was your media psychologist and what do they do for their job? Yeah, so you can be a psychologist and not just work with humans. You can work on things like the environment in general or overall things with specific animals. And in fact, people will do research with specific animals as well. Alrighty, so what can you do with a degree in this area of psychology? Yeah, so if you're someone who thinks psychology is for me, but I hate the idea of always being cooped up, right? This might be a nice specialty for you. And this certainly, I know some of you in here were thinking like rec therapy or sport and rec management. This would be something that would really dovetail well with those skills as well. All right, how do you make it happen? Exactly. So you need that environmental science component as well as the psych stuff. And then what can you earn here? Yeah, and so that would be right when you got out. Maybe if you do, there's a thing that you would do in a lot of scientific fields called a postdoctoral fellowship, or they'll just call it a postdoc. And that might be what you earn during those years where you're getting additional training, but actually making real money. Just to give you an example of, what your salary might look like while you're getting your degree. Now, granted, this was like almost 20 years ago now. I'm feeling old. But when I was in graduate school, I had an assistantship with the department. And so I was paid about $14,000 a year, which like you could not live on here. But I was in rural Ohio, so it worked. Like at the end of my grad school career, actually had a 2-bedroom townhouse I rented for me and my cat for $600 a month. Like that's unheard of here, right? And then when I was on my internship year, when I was working full time, I was making about 24K. And then my salary jumped substantially once I got into the actual field. So I'm guessing, hoping those numbers have increased with inflation, but you don't make a ton while you're training, but then you can kind of step it up once you have all those degrees and certifications. All right, group 3, tell us about the understanding section for developmental psychology. Yeah, exactly. And before I chime in, let's give us an example of research in action here. Yeah, and so that's really important and something that sometimes we forget when we talk about development. People often just think of like until you're 18, right? But we keep developing and changing during our entire lives. So people in development might also be folks who are looking at the effects of dementia, right? Or, you know, is the midlife crisis a thing, right? All of those would come into play here. All righty, tell us about your meet a psychologist. Yeah, so this is something that a lot of people in psych are pushing for more is, you know, let's look at the same question from different angles, essentially. And so let's take biological stuff like doing MRIs on the brain. And there's a type of MRI you can do called a functional MRI or fMRI. Put someone in a brain scanner, have them do a task and see how their brain lights up and changes while they do it. But pair that with some of these other things as well. All right, so what can you do as a developmental psychologist? Yeah, and how do you make it happen? Cool, and you all did a nice quick summary of the range, so I don't think I need to say that out loud for your salary, but you see your salary range here as well. If you're thinking developmental psychology is something you're interested in, I highly encourage you to talk to Dr. Martorell within our department. She is our developmental psychologist, and in addition to teaching and doing research, she actually has made sort of a side career, side hustle writing textbooks about development. So she's got a lot of really interesting contributions. All right, group 4, tell us about the understanding section about experimental psychology. I don't even know what group 4 is. Who's group 4? All right, rock, paper, scissors. Somebody decide who's talking. Exactly. So these are the folks who are doing the basic science part of the psychology. They are the ones kind of grinding away at trying to ask and answer our important questions. What was an example of research in action? Exactly. So actually, Dr. Ariel, who is in our department, his research focuses on this as well. What is the best way to help students study so that they will do the best, things along those lines. And also some cool stuff with eye tracking. And so often when I say that, people think it's like a Mac product, like iPod, right? But what it is there's a bar that we can put under a computer screen, and it actually measures like what you look at and for how long on the screen. It's really, really cool and could give us a lot of insight into things. All right, what does your meet the psychologist do for her job? Yeah, so, you know, you can be an experimental psychologist and also sort of a developmental psychologist, right? And this also sort of has a clinical function. So lots of different things here. All right, and what can you do? What can you do? And how do you make it happen? Yeah, so especially in this day and age, psychologists really have to know some very advanced stats methods. That being said, I have to say, I was always someone who was like okay at math, but didn't understand what the heck the point was, like when I was doing things like calculus. And I know my husband, who has a degree in math, would be like, what do you mean? But full disclosure, when I got to psych stats, I was like, oh, I get it now. So they're a lot more intuitive, these statistical methods. And we kind of have to develop our own sometimes to answer these really complex questions. So for example, there's a technique that we've developed in psychology called structural equation modeling, where we can essentially either through formulas or by actually drawing a picture of how all the variables relate, test whether a given model fits how well the variables relate to each other. So you do need to know a lot about that. Alrighty, group 5, health psych. Linda and India. Again, rock, paper, scissors, whoever, or even the one person doesn't have to do all the talking, you can switch off. Yeah, exactly. So they are really looking at the intersection of psychology and medicine. This is another really growing area of psychology. A lot of clinical psychologists and research psychologists are really starting to focus on and get integrated into these sectors. Alrighty, and give an example of research in action. Exactly. So even though I'm not trained as a health psychologist, I did some work on health psychology while I was in graduate school. And for example, one of the things I did was do pre-surgical evaluations for people who were going to get bariatric surgery, what we used to call stomach stapling, and is now gastric bypass, gastric banding, gastric sleeve. And a lot of what we did was this, try to see like how emotions are going to motivate people to change and what gets in the way, essentially. All right, so tell us about your Meet a Psychologist. Yeah, so this is so important. Researchers have really known that this is an issue for years and years, but it really came into stark awareness when the pandemic hit. And we saw unequal numbers of people of color getting COVID more, dying more, right? And so we really need to be looking at these health disparities. All right, so what can you do? Yeah, and I'll kind of do, again, you all were really clear here. Yeah, for a lot of these fields, there will be entry-level work you can do with a bachelor's. And in fact, one of my classes I teach later today is our senior level seminar. And that's a lot of what we talk about is like, by the time you get to a senior level in psychology, you just sort of assume you need to have a doctorate, but there's a lot of things you can do entry level. And then, yeah, they are making pretty good money. They're often working in large university or health systems. There's a big movement to integrate health psychologists into private practice primary care clinics. So there you would have a psychologist in the office. So if someone needs psychological help, you don't have to be like, Here's a referral, go set up an appointment. You just walk them down the hall. Okay. All right, group 6, tell us about human factors and engineering side. Yeah, tell us about the understanding section. There you go.
They also apply the science of psychology to improve life critical products, medical equipment, and
yeah, so one of my undergrad professors did research on this type of thing for Ford Motor Company, for the Air Force. She was actually using eye tracking to look at things like, do those screen interfaces actually help you to pay attention, right? Or are you actually paying attention to the screen instead of there? My favorite story she told is she was doing that research and came home from the lab one day, and they were looking in particular about like when you're on your cell phone, and someone had crashed into the side of a building in her apartment complex because they were on their phone. So she was like, research in action, right? All righty, give an example of research in action from the website.
When buying a TV, they make the buying less frustrating and easier.
Exactly, so we're thinking about things as simple as that, right? So some consumer psychology goes in here as well. All right, tell us about your meet a psychologist.
Dr. Emmanuel Robinson takes problems that need creative solutions and examines how to achieve a better outcome. Over time, he sees how the solution plays out in the real world.
Exactly. All right, and what can you do with this area?
Study how to interact with technology, which traits help design machines that we can use safely effectively, and use information to create designs most effective workspaces.
Exactly. Yeah. And then I'll just summarize the last two. Again, we're seeing pretty similar here. You can do some entry level stuff, but if you're really wanting to be the person who drives the research, right, you're probably going to want a PhD. This intersects a lot with, there's a human factor section of engineering. And so one of my friends at grad school, her husband is a human factors engineer, and he now works for Fitbit, right? So I'm sure they have human factor psychologists there as well. All right, group 7, tell us about IO psychology. Tell us about the understanding. Yeah, and we'll get to this when we get to the IO section, but it's really interesting how sometimes they find that like any change almost can make people work happier. It's really interesting. All right, give an example of research in action. Exactly. Yeah, and what about the meet a psychologist? Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. And there are IO psychologists that might work on things like how can TSA do better screenings? I just thought of that because of the aviation example. And again, I'm just going to try to quickly summarize so we can get to group 7. This is on me for time management, not y'all. So again, lots of different settings. You have to have at least a master's to really work here. But again, here's where you can make a lot of bang for your buck, right? Alrighty, so our online group, tell us about social psychology. What does the understanding section say? And whoever has the ability, go ahead.
It states that the study of the brain function and behavior, it explains the relationship between the environment and behavior to better understand how we function in everyday life.
Awesome, yeah. Side note, our social psychologist in the department is Dr. Jackson, whose office is right across the hall. So if you're more interested in this, you can definitely chat with him. All right, tell us about your research in action.
So the one that stood out to me was the promoting health one, like the healthcare providers. Deborah Tate used psychological science to identify strategies of losing weight.
Yeah, exactly. So we can see the intersection of some of these subfields and overlapping. Tell us about your meta psychologist.
Our meta psychologist was Dr. Adam Long. He was a social psychologist, and he did work on how we can create a better and healthier workforce.
Awesome. Yeah, and then again, I'll just quickly summarize because a lot of these do end up feeling the same. But yeah, there's a whole host of different fields you can work in, subfields, and we will kind of talk more about work settings and degrees on Friday when we wrap up this chapter, and then we'll start chapter 2 as well. Thank you all for participating today. Hopefully this was a little more interesting than just me talking at y'all. And thank you for our Zoom folks for participating. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome. Have a good one.
You too.
You're welcome. Have a good day.